Welcome to the Unlist. This marks video number 150 for me and also marks a turning point for the channel. So before I get into the subject of the video, let me just say in brief that there are life changes ahead and my availability to do these videos will drastically decrease. Ironically, I may end up with more free time at home. Still working the same hours, making the same money, but my schedule will be shifting in a direction that makes it more difficult to do videos, to have time in an isolated environment without anybody else around to do videos. So because of that, I have to do less. And I've been doing a bit too many anyway. I've been feeling the burnout. So maybe this is for the best. Back in the day, I only did like one live stream a week, if that. So like I said, less is more. But just figured before I launch into the content of this video, you should know that you'll still be seeing shorts from me because those I can do anywhere, anytime on a street corner. If I really feel a Jones for a short, I can do it while waiting in line at Starbucks if I really want to. Everyone's gonna be like, what the hell is he talking about while I wait for my coffee? But I could do it. It's not a problem. But these 25-minute videos, yeah, they need a bit more privacy and a bit more time than I'm going to have going forward. So that change won't be until July 1st, but I might as well get you used to it now by winding it down a bit, which is what I'm doing. 2 videos a week. We'll see where it goes. Once I'm in my new work schedule, if I can only do one, it's only one. You guys can look at my backlog and you have to deal, right? Life goes on, like that TV show with Corky and Fred Savage. So now, the video is about the oud phenomenon. Not oud, done a video on that, you can go watch it already. I am specifically talking about the oud phenomenon that swept Western perfumery about 20 years ago. That has not been discussed in great detail in any past videos where I mentioned oud. I mentioned it a little bit in my Montal and Mancera video, one of my early videos, because Montal and Mancera were definitely a part of the oud phenomenon. And then I also mentioned it a bit in my video on oud itself, because again, the phenomenon factors in. But I've covered more of the material itself, how it's made, how it's enjoyed, the history. I've covered more specific houses that had a part to play, but never really talked about the actual phenomenon itself, how it started, how it ended up. So let's do that today as video 150, as the official, turning of a new page where things slow down a bit. So, in any case, from what I can tell, the oud phenomenon was an attempt to find the next exotica to market as luxury. And this is because back at the turn of the 20th century, Orientalism was a hot ticket, okay? They were taking any and every material they could find from the Middle East, from the Far East, from India, from what was at that time, still countries under different names. Ottoman Empire still existed. And they were trying to find ways to bring that stuff north and west into France, into the UK, and make perfumes themed after parts of China, okay, parts of Japan, parts of the Arab world. But one thing they never targeted was oud. And I mentioned in my video on oud why I think that was to a degree. I think it had to do with the scarcity, rarity, and the cultural and religious significance of oud itself, that there just wasn't enough oud to go around, and the Arab perfumers weren't really inclined to share it, so it just didn't. Whereas sandalwood, plenty of that back then. Orris butter, damask rose, Turkish rose, frankincense, myrrh, dragon's blood, all that stuff, plenty of that. Take all you want, right? We don't care, we got plenty, but you can't have our oud, right? So then there's the thing where I feel like oud was just too stanky. Even though we had civet and we had castoreum and all these other things in Western fragrance back then, oud was a bridge too far, too phenolic, too dirty birdie. You know, Hyraceum, another material from North Africa, doesn't get much play in Western perfumes, and it's because, for that reason, it's just a bridge too far for Western noses. So Hyraceum and oud are both not super common outside of like Middle Eastern fragrances or particular niche brands where they play with it, like the Zing, Larsen Parfumeur played with Hyraceum. A couple other fragrances play with it as well. So anyhow, fast forward until the early 2000s. By that point, sandalwood had been harvested to near extinction in India. So we had Javanol, polysantol, all the other stuff. Frankincense was getting more expensive. We were scraping the barrel dry on that. And tastes in amber had shifted so much by the early 20th century that by the early 21st century, you couldn't get away with those big, musky, spicy ambers that we enjoyed. Even up into the 80s, right? We couldn't get away with that sort of thing now. People didn't want that. It was too heavy. So ambers got really woody, really spicy, really kind of dried out and boring. Or in Avon's case, just very smooth and velvety and musky and really devoid of all the other parts of amber that is more labdanum than anything in Avon's amber, honestly. It's really just spiced labdanum. That's what Avon amber is. It's labdanum with a little bit of Lawry's mixed in. Take some Lawry seasoned salt, sprinkle it in your labdanum, stir it up. That's your Avon amber right there. So we needed something new. The new ish, right? Like the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas say, the new ish. What's the ish going to be? Guess what? Chicken butt. It's oud. And obviously the same rules applied to oud in 2002 that applied in 1902 or 1892. It's the same deal. Too rare, too precious, too scarce, too expensive. So let's synthesize it and introduce that to Western noses. And thus they did. Firmenich, IFF, Givaudan, Simrise, Robertet, Mon, Takasago. They all came out with their own flavors of oud, and most of them were captives. Okay? Now, the guy is going to raise his hand in the back. Hey, what about Balenciaga Pour Homme from 1990? Yeah, I've done a video on that too, guys. And I basically say in that video that there's oud in that, but they didn't list it in the notes because it wouldn't be a selling point. So while it was in there, and if you know what oud smells like, you know it's in there, it was just a background player. It wasn't meant to be the focus. It's more of an amber oud fragrance, that is, really. Marketed as an amber fragrance, but more of an amber oud fragrance. If you know, you know, okay? That's why it's $5 billion a bottle now, because people figured out what that was. So that's why it also only had one production run, because real oud is expensive. So Gerard Anthony and Bogart Group that produced that fragrance, they had a one and done with that. You will never see that fragrance ever again. Guaranteed. Now, Tom Ford introduced oud properly to Western noses in 2002 with M7, listing it as part of the market copy, listing it as a selling point. And when it got introduced that way, it was really just a Coca-Cola smelling spiced woody amber, because it was using synthetics. It was using accords created with perfumers Alberto Morillas, who I did a video on recently, and Jacques Cavalier. And it doesn't really smell like anything we know today as oud, but you've got to remember, when people were smelling that stuff in 2002, they had no fucking idea what oud was. So that was oud to them. You know, it'd be like someone taking a heavy metal guitar cover of Wagner or something, or Bach, and telling someone who's never heard classical music, that's classical music. Sure, it's the same piece of music played with an electric guitar and probably sounds awesome, but it's not the original orchestral arrangement. It's not, or arrangement for piano or harpsichord, whatever it's written for. So you get in the wheelhouse, you're like, I have a basic understanding. but you don't really know, right? Because you're listening to, I don't know, Yngwie Malmsteen play it or something, or Uli John Roth play it. You're not hearing it done with a full orchestra or a pianist or whoever. So that's kind of what M7 was. It was like taking oud and pushing oud through the lens of what was at the time cutting edge Western synthetic perfumery. So through that prism, it failed miserably. They went like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, running off the cliff, chasing the bird, and he's like, ah, and you see him go like that. Hilariously enough, though, all the other brands at that time had placed all their money on the M7 horse winning the race. So when that fragrance launched, before sales numbers were even really confirmed for that fragrance, 2002, 2003, all the other players in the background were whipping up oud perfumes too. So then they come out the gate behind that horse, right? We're in the Kentucky Derby now. They're all chasing the horse, right? And then M7 stumbles, and the jockey flies off and hits the dirt. He nosedives into the dirt. And all the other horses just run past. And they're like, wait a minute, we're out here in the lead now. What's going on? Because YSL, who was owned by Gucci Group at that time, just threw in the towel on the sales. They weren't going to let that sit on the market for longer. But then, all those other perfumes that were oud fragrances inspired by M7, they were successful. Which meant YSL go, oh no, we were premature on this. We need to stop, turn around, undo our mistake. So then they reissued M7 in 2008 as Oud Absolu. M7 Oud Absolu. Not even 6 years later, it was back, baby. And this time it had oud in the name. So you knew what it was. Not that you didn't know before, but you double know now. You extra know now. You know. Back then you knew, but now you know. So, I don't know. Did it sell better? I don't think so. But the thing is, it inspired tons of clones. A lot of those clones also from the Middle East, like I've done on my video. So, one of the most inspirational failures of all time. One of the most successful failures. Oxymoron, that is. Contradictory statement there, paradox. One of the most successful failures of all time. It was just successful to everyone else but YSL. YSL was the only one not making money on that fragrance. Everyone else made tons of money on that fragrance. Really bizarre, guys. Now, I think the successful thing of oud was pushing it just a little more towards authenticity, making it just barnyardy enough, just medicinal enough, just phenolic enough to make someone go, wow, that's exotic, right? It's flirtatious. It's just challenging enough to make someone feel like they're a rebel, to make someone feel like they're a little bit dangerous. They're a little bit scandalous. They are causing a minor controversy, to use the British pronunciation. They're causing a minor controversy in the area, okay? Now, it's not very germane to the discussion, but I must mention that with the oud phenomenon, ultimately, the deal maker was price point. Not how animalic it was, not how authentic it was, just price point. A lot of times people will want something just because it's expensive and they can't have it. So all of the really successful oud perfumes creeping into the 2010s were all the big ticket Dior stuff, okay? The leather oud before it got discontinued, the Oud 27 by Le Labo, the Parfum de Marly ouds like a Castor, okay? All that stuff. All the Bikilian ouds like Musk Oud. All the $350, $400 bottle ouds. Those became the ones everyone wanted, okay? Everyone wanted those. Didn't really matter what it smelled like, necessarily. It's like, oh, I can afford this. this expensive, exotic, dangerous oud, right, from the Middle East, okay? So that was the real thing. And it's kind of stupid. It's also kind of sad. It shows how gullible people are. But we also got a lot of really interesting, lesser known oud perfumes from small niche brands, you know, like Ex Idolo with 33. I don't even know if you can still buy that. Maybe you still can. But that was interesting. Parfums de Cita, Oud Infini. Very animalic that one is. Another one that came and went. I think that one's gone. Lots of them, yeah. And a lot of them were only in the market for a handful of years because remember, this is the peak now. We're in peak oud. Everyone from freaking the top of the food chain, Raja Dove, everyone from Raja Dove all the way down to Jovan. Yes, fucking Jovan. Everyone from $500 down to 15 bucks was trying to produce an oud perfume by 2010s, and it was market saturation. Now, I mentioned in my Montal Mancera video, a lot of their perfumes were rose oud combos, and they had a very surprising dark horse hit with the Western market. The original Montal perfumes were designed to take Middle Eastern oil-based perfume and turn it Western with the inclusion of alcohol. Put in metal tin cans, which are better at preserving against heat, and sprayable on skin. So a lot of those fragrances like Attar, Black Oud, Aoud, Clé d'Arabie, all that stuff was made for the Dubai customer to have the novelty of a typical Attar, but in a spray form. So it was eau de parfum, but was oily like an Attar. It sat on skin like an Attar, but because it was alcohol based, a little bit, right? Not very much alcohol, but enough to get through the sprayer. It was that novelty of wearing a Western perfume. Meanwhile, back in Gotham City, the Mancera perfumes, they were being pitched to the French, being pitched to people in the UK and the United States. And all those perfumes were much more Western in feel. Cedrat Bois, Oud Violet, okay, Windwood, that sort of thing. But people started liking those Middle Eastern themed Montal perfumes instead, liked them more. Black Oud was the big one. Black Oud was the one that blew up the rose, patchouli, oud trifecta, the Triforce. Okay, your Link and Legend of Zelda. Da-da-da-da. You're holding up like this over your head, and you're like that, and then the screen goes, closes on you. Da, 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 da. You're running around with your bottle of rose oud in your hand. Da, 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 and you're smacking people with your rose oud. So that was a big surprise, okay? People were not really expecting that to take off like it did. And of course, Montal's reaction was to just spit out 15,000 more. Oh, you guys like rose oud up there? Well, shit. Let's make a shit ton more of them. So suddenly you had oud sand roses. You had oud rose sand. You had sand rose oud. You had rose sand oud. You had oud and oud, black and oud and white and oud and purple, red and yellow oud. Okay? You had oud. And they all kind of smelled sort of the same, right? Different variations on the same theme. And that market oversaturation combined with all of the Western houses, okay, all the Versaces and the Gucci's and the Parfums de Marley's and all of that stuff, they are all putting out oud perfumes. By Kilian had a bunch of them, all right? And then all the actual authentic Middle Eastern houses that had been doing this for like, what, centuries? Literal centuries? All of their stuff was coming up into the gray market and the Western market. So suddenly you had Rasasi and Asghari, and I mentioned in my video, you know, and Latafa and Al Haramain. And if you want to spend big bucks, Nabil and stuff, and Spirit Dubai, all of that sort of thing. it was just too much. So suddenly everyone just got really sick of smelling the oud rose, rose oud and rose. And there were so many other types of oud that were being neglected. And I've covered in my oud video how it's done differently, different combinations of materials. But that most common rose oud patchouli, that trifecta, that kind of became the smell of oud for a lot of people once the M7 stuff died away and all of the early Dior and Le Labo stuff, you know, the oud 27 and leather oud, once that whole thing died away, it really became all about the patchouli, the rose. Juliet Has a Gun made a bunch of those. You had another oud, you had Midnight Oud, oh, Midnight Oud, oh, like that. We had a bunch of ouds, and it was just too much because you would go into a Sephora, you'd go into an Ulta, you'd go into like a JC fucking Penney, and there'd be oud perfumes there. Like, I remember before they went out of business, or all their physical locations closed, Art of fucking Shaving had an oud. You could go into Art of Shaving, where they get all the expensive razors, and they had an oud fragrance. And I'm like, oh my God, it's over. Okay, it's over. Oud is canceled. Let's go home now. You get the speakerphone out. Okay, guys, that's it. Break it up. Time to go home, because barbershop brands have oud fragrances now. Penhaligon's had a ton of oud fragrances, like Hal Fetty and a bunch of other ones. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm done with this. Time to go home. The party's over. We have been over-ouded, all right? We have been oud-maxed. Use a Pokemon term, Gigamax. We've been oud-maxed now. We are oud-maxing. It's done. It's over with. It's time to throw in the towel, guys. Play another game. So here we are in 2024. And it is about 20 years-ish, give or take, since that oud phenomenon blew up. And we still get oud perfumes now, clearly. They're still being made, but they're just a part of the landscape. And a lot of the really interesting ones made by Western brands are gone, retired, because they didn't sell that well. And what we're left with is just kind of like a yard sale, kind of like an estate sale. We're just picking over the remains of that craze. Whatever survived the purge, right, like the movies, whatever oud perfumes survived that purge of all the discontinuations, whatever's left is what we have to choose from. And a couple of new things here and there. But we will never really see Western brands pump out oud perfumes quite like they did back then. I mean, Fragrance Du Bois, their whole thing is oud, right? But even a lot of their fragrances don't smell in the way you would think an oud perfume would smell. A lot of them are much more based on other materials. Oud just becomes the thing they put on the label. And I know people have been sued by them for accusing them of not using real oud because they have like a 0.000001 trace amount, a single molecule of oud in every bottle or whatever. I don't give a shit. Not a brand I really go after, but their whole thing has been oud perfumes. But a lot of those just end up being fougères and chypres and oriental perfumes and woody ambers and all the usual suspects. It's just way down in there, like the Prego commercial, it's in there, right? The oud is in there, in that mishmash, goulash, whatever it is. So, what is your take on the oud craze? Let me know what you think. That's basically what I got to say on it. And the craze is more or less over. We are now in the BR 540 craze. Everyone wants to smell like chemicals, like Varanis and ethyl maltol and some saffron materials slung around with some cashmere. And that's where we are now. That's the smell of luxury these days, is Velveeta, basically, Velveeta cheese. So what is your take on the oud craze? What are your favorite oud perfumes from that craze? And then get with me and we'll see where things go. Thanks for watching and catch you next time.